A very good evening to you and welcome to Politics 101. David Hines here on a Monday evening, our first program for the week. Just, if you will, share the link and make sure everyone knows that Politics 101 is on tonight. Good evening to you if you're joining us from Guyana. Uh, Understand there was some rain on the coast there today, but some of you will say, "What's new? What's new?" We now cannot keep track of the weather, and it's not only in Guyana but across the world. Global warming, and of course, those deniers, um, something must be wrong with them because if they do not see the pattern or lack of pattern of the weather, then they're not seeing anything. But we are here. We are here this evening. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening to those people joining us from Linden. I know lots of you tune in from Linden. Good evening. Good evening to Mocha. Hopefully we will be in Mocha shortly. This Hello, welcome back to Politics 101. We got kicked off there a moment ago, but we're back on. We're back on. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening. Good evening to those of you who are joining us from Guyana. Wherever you are in Guyana, whether you're in Georgetown, you're on the west side, good evening, then I'm still, or whether you are in the quarantine, on the quarantine coast, good evening, New Amsterdam. If you're down the river, Berbice River, whether you're on the east bank or the west bank of the Berbice River, how about the good people of Ithaca? Ithaca, you people there at Blaymont, and as you get into Ithaca, welcome to Politics 101. And those of you who are joining us from the hinterland, welcome, welcome. Good evening, Golden Grove. Good evening, Golden Grove, Anns Grove, Nabaklis, Victoria, Belfield. Good evening if you join us from Enmore. Good evening, Bedford Wacton, BV Pleasance, Buxton, and its environs. Welcome to Politics 101. And I know some of you are joining us from Bachelor's Adventure Paradise. I got some roots there, you know. My father is from Paradise. Welcome to Politics 101. And you know, there are lots of paradises. You know, there's a paradise on the west coast of Berbice. If you join us from the west coast of Berbice, welcome. Good evening, Hopetown. Good evening, Hopetown. Linden. Good evening, Linden. And welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link and let everyone know that everybody should know that Politics 101 is on tonight. Another day in Guyana. Another day of dictatorial moves. Another day that we are called upon to defend ourselves in Guyana. Good evening if you're joining us from New York City. Good evening, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. How about those of you in Jersey, New Jersey? Sister Casey, welcome to Politics 101. Washington, D.C., Maryland, welcome to Politics 101. Virginia, the tri-state area, welcome. And if you join us from the West Coast, California, Arizona, some of you are up there in Washington State, welcome to Politics 101. And those of you coming to us from the old deep South, South Carolina, North Carolina in the house, Georgia, those of you in Atlanta, Georgia, and of course, those of you in Florida. And I know some of you are joining from Texas. Welcome to Politics 101. And if you're out there somewhere in the middle of America, you're still welcome. Those of you in Chicago, Illinois, welcome to Politics 101. And our brothers and sisters in Canada, me go Canada by, me go Canada. And you know, they don't say, we West Indians, we are quite creative, you know. I'm amazed. Nobody says ginger ale in Guyana. We say Canada Dry. We call it by its right name. No ginger ale, Canada Dry. And the paper towel is Bounty. We are very creative in Guyana and the Caribbean. They can't stop us. We put our own spin to things. No ginger ale, Canada Dry. Good evening, Canada. Good evening, Canada. Toronto, Montreal, those of you in the Ontario province, because that's where most of you are. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening. And not forgetting the Europeans, those who are joining us from Europe, United Kingdom, England, we say England is part of the UK, Great Britain. Welcome to Politics 101 if you're joining us from France. Welcome. Good evening, Barbados. I know we come in from Barbados. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101, the wider Caribbean, our Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda. Good evening, Guyanese. Good evening, Nevis, St. Kitts, Nevis. And I know some of you are in Anguilla. Welcome to Politics 101. Good evening. St. Martin, yes, we acknowledge you. And of course, our sisters and brothers over there in Suriname and French Guyana. Welcome to Politics 101. David Hines here on a Monday evening. I tell you, another day of denial of rights, another day of denial of freedom. Ipada G held a forum yesterday to deal with the land question, African Guyanese and the land question. Because we know they're land grabbing. We look at what they're doing all over the place. Moko, Arcadia. And we are going to be in Moko shortly. We're going to be paying a visit to Moko shortly. So we're going to let you know in due course. What they did in Danamstel or attempted to do, what they're doing on West Bobishan in the quarantine, trying to grab our lands. Land is premium. We have always known that. And don't be fooled because it's the oil economy that we know we don't no longer need land. We are an agricultural country. We need land to plant food. We need land for housing. And as far as we are concerned, the land, our land, our land. African Guyanese are the only ethnic group that were not given land. We're not talking about the Chinese and the Portuguese here because they are small ethnic groups. They were given affirmative action in the 19th century when they did not prove adaptable to the sugar plantations. They were given affirmative action to get into commerce. But land was given to our Amerindian sisters and brothers, and so it must be. Theoretically, they were here before all of us. Lands were given around the estates to our Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters, or East Indian Guyanese brothers and sisters, and so it must be. They toiled on the plantations from 1838 up until 1917. Legally, 1917 was when indentureship was finished. And so they deserve whatever affirmative action they were given. African Guyanese are the only ethnic group in Guyana that was not given affirmative action. Whatever lands we have, we bought it. We bought those lands. And those were lands that are drenched with our blood and our sweat and our tears and our joys. And it's why we call them ancestral lands, because they're drenched with the spirits of our ancestors. The thousands of enslaved men and women who were killed by the genocidal slave system, their bodies, their bones are buried there. Edgar Mete also, in his famous book, called My Bones and My Flute. My bones. The bones of our ancestors are buried in those rivers in Guyana and those lands. But we bought those lands. And so they're trying to grab our lands under the excuse of eminent domain, that government need the lands for all kinds of stuff. But those lands are our lands. And the government has to get permission from us to use our lands. That has not been the case. And so IPADG called the forum yesterday to discuss the importance of land to the African Guyanese. And the forum was supposed to be held at GITC, Government Place. Permission was granted. This thing was held yesterday. And on Saturday, IPADG was given notice that they would not be able to hold the forum there. They had to quickly move the forum to Christian Labor College. We remember last year when the Burnham Foundation wanted to hold an exhibition at the public library. They were denied those things, denied access to that building. You know, I want to say a couple of things about this. One, we hear every day the PPP talk about what Burnham did and what the PNC did. And so, therefore, they're measuring themselves. They're comparing themselves when it comes to governance against previous governments. So far, so good. You are denying Guyanese organizations access to government buildings because you perceive them to be your political opponents and because they're black. That's what you're doing. And you are every day, Burnham this, Burnham that, Burnham this, Burnham that. Are you emulating the Burnham that you're supposedly condemning? Or are you doing worse than him? If you are comparing yourself to this dictator and dictatorship, it means that you must not do anything that smells of dictatorship. Let me make it very clear. I'm old enough to remember the PNC government of 64 to 85. I was on the streets and in the gullies opposing the excesses of that government. I know the government of the PPP from 1992 to 2015. I was also in the streets and the gullies opposing the excesses of that government. I was around, as most of you were, during the brief stint of the coalition from 2015 to 2020. And now we have this government from 2020 to the present. And I'm speaking here as a citizen, as an activist, and as a political scientist. The present government, when it comes to human rights and civil liberties, It is the worst government that we have had. And I come from the thesis, I come at this from the thesis that all of our post-colonial governments have overreached, all of them. I'm not telling you all to stop liking Jagan if you all like me, or stop liking Burnham if you all like him, or stop liking Granger or Jagdi or whoever. You must make a distinction between your admiration for leaders, your support for them electorally, and the naked facts. And the naked facts is that our post-colonial experience in Guyana and the Caribbean has shown that our leaders have not managed the power as well as they should. All of them. It doesn't mean that they did not do positive things. Comparatively speaking, they've done a lot of positive things. There are no concentration camps in Guyana. No, there are no concentration camps in Guyana as there are in other countries of the world. So our leaders did not go as far as the colonial masters went, and some of the colonialists are still going. But when one makes a comparative analysis of all of the governments, this PPP government is the worst. This Ali government is worse than the one under Ramatar and the one under Jagdeo. And I'll tell you why it's the worst. It is the worst because it embodies the worst of those governments. It embodies the worst of the PPP governments. It embodies the worst of the PNC governments. And that is why it is the worst government that we've ever had. Not a single day passes without manifest excesses by this government. It is totally out of control. It is not a dictatorial act today and one next 2 months every single day. That's how they're wired. So when we look back, yes, I remember under the PNC government, 1964-85, they would deny you use of buildings, government buildings. In those days, you didn't even think about asking. Okay, you know what the answer would be. It continued under the PPP, 1992 to 2015. Granger government was different. I want you all to know that. I keep saying that 2015-2020 government was the best government we have had when it comes to human rights, when it comes to putting a brake on authoritarian and dictatorial rule. It's the best. They had shortcomings in other areas. When you look back at the coalition government, you can't think of anything transformational in the way that you could, think about under Burnham, the national service, the free education from nursery to university, all those programs to lift the poor, the democratization of education so that you could go to Golden Grove Secondary School or Borbees High School or Linden Foundation, and you get the same education that a child is getting at UG at QC and bishops and so on. All of that happened under Burnham. He democratized education to make the children of the poor get the same quality of education that as the children of the rich. So when you're thinking about Burnham, there are those big things that you remember. You remember those big things. You remember national service. You remember education, the education revolution. You remember the infrastructural expansion. But I don't pay too much of attention to roads and bridges and so on. I pay attention to things that affect human beings in a material way and spiritual way. And so for me, education is important in terms of bringing the poor out of the backwaters and bringing them into the mainstream of education. So somebody like myself could sit here this evening as a quote-unquote educated person. Prior to that, it was difficult for people of my color and my social class. And you all know that. National service was able to bring the poor and find an outlet for their creative energies. So many poor people were taken off the streets and went to national service, and their lives were transformed. The Indian holidays, the East Indian holidays, all of them on the Burnham, all of them on the Burnham, all of them, all of them. And the way in which when you see your culture becoming part of the national landscape, what it does to the spirit and the identity. And so you remember the Burnham regime for those things. The coalition doesn't have any of those big things that you can remember them by. But they ought to be remembered by the fact that they were the least authoritarian of all of our governments. They put a break on the authoritarian state, the criminal state. Opponents were not being assassinated. There was no political assassination under the coalition. So in a sense, the coalition's achievements were more, not so much on the big things that you remember them for, but they calmed the society. The society, for the first time since independence, had a chance to breathe. The police, the political police was not rampant. Of course, police brutality continued. Police are always going to shoot down the poor. People don't care what regime is in power. But insofar as the police being used for political purposes, not under the coalition. So in a sense, the coalition opened the doors for a reorganization of the democratic state. They opened the doors. They were just there for 5 years. They gave us a democratic opening. And then this PPP comes to power, and that democratic opening has vanished. The door has been slammed, and we have a full-blown authoritarian government. Authoritarianism under the Jack Dio and the Burnham regimes was a different kind of authoritarianism from this one. This dictatorship that we are facing is a dictatorship that has the full support of all the powers of the world. It has the full support of one of the largest oil companies in the world. It has more money at its disposal than any of the governments before, and all of the governments combined. But more than that, what makes this dictatorship the most dangerous is that the people in the government are totally intellectually ignorant. You listen to them speak. They don't have a sense of the history of Guyana. Absolutely none. They do not understand Guyana's place in the region and the world. They have no sense of the nature of ethnically divided societies. They are intellectually ignorant. And it is that intellectual ignorance, along with total support from the foreign powers, total support from the big oil company, when you mix all of that together, you have a ruthless dictatorship. Ruthless. I'm not talking about book sense. That's a different story. That's a different story. I'm not talking about book education. I'm saying that if you want to govern a country, you have to understand that country. Chase Burnham didn't understand Guyana, or Jagan, or Ramutar. And to some extent, I think Jack Yo started off intellectually ignorant, but he came to understand Guyana to a certain extent. But this combination of Jack Dio and Irfan Ali and so on, this regime comes from a place that doesn't understand it. So because they don't understand the country, they're governing based on short-term solutions. I send the police today to West Bobis. The police go there, the police shut down the protests around the Henry boys, and that's that, I'm done. They have no understanding that tells them that 2 or 3 years later, that same West Bobis that you behave in such a nasty way is going to become the center for ethnic cleansing. You encourage bushlock, and you encourage bad settlement, to stone people's children, black children, to run police out. But because you have no understanding of the human psyche, you could not see Woodley Park coming. Or you could not see Hopetown coming. You go into the black communities and you recruit friends. You're not going there to look for votes. You're not interested in votes in the black community. You want to give us that impression, but we know you're not interested in votes. What you're interested in is recruiting a couple of villagers give them some privileges, and you feel that you got it made. You got Buxton under control, you got Agrica under control, you got Linden under control, but because you're intellectually and politically ignorant, you could not see what happened in Buxton a couple of weeks coming. That the contradictions of how you're governing will manifest themselves every day. And so it is that total ignorance by the present leaders, coupled with the lack of accountability to us in Guyana and to the foreign forces, that makes this government so dangerous. The simplicity of thought. The Americans and the British and the Europeans and the Canadians supporting me, so I can go and shoot Quindon Bacchus and nothing will happen. That is what you call simplistic thought. That because the Americans and so on support me and I'm not renewing the contract, so Exxon loves me. And so I can go and demolish people's homes in Moko and nothing will happen. The simplicity of thought says to them, all I need to say is the coalition didn't do nothing for you all black people. And we're going to come in there and give you all a $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000 so that you all ain't going to work. We give you all $40,000 for not working. And you all are going to shun the opposition and embrace us. Simplistic of thought. Simplistic thought, simplicity of thought. Only people who don't understand politics and don't understand the society would think that way and govern that way. That I can mow down the homes of people in Moko and then said it in the afternoon, I did it because I don't want to appear weak. Well, you're weak. You are weak. You're weak in mind. You are so small-minded that you think if you send black people in Moko to lick down the people's house, and you send the black police to oversee and to kneel down on a black woman, that you can dismiss it as is black people doing it. Have you not studied the world to understand that when the going gets hot, those same black policemen and women that appear to be loyal to you today are going to be disloyal to you? You don't have a sense of people. You can only believe that black people are permanently in a state where they're prepared to shoot their brother and their sister and their mommy. And that they will be like that all the time. You're stupid if you believe that. But you do believe it because you're stupid. Politically stupid, intellectually stupid. That you believe that black people are so less than human that they will be your stooge, some of them, forever and forevermore. And so, even as we are pointing out that you're moving down the road of apartheid, even after cleansing Black people from a school in your district, even after all of that, you deny it, Padre G, the use of a building. People say and ask, how low can you go? There is law to go. Law to go. Because these people believe they're invincible. They actually do believe it. And that invincibility is not so much about their own prowess. Their sense of invincibility is measured against what they see as African docility. And that is what makes them dangerous. Because if people are docile, you use them, you abuse them, you kill them with impunity. The logic of the ignorant, intellectually ignorant thought process takes us to where we are today. You shoot a young boy in a village. You haven't solved that crime. The story has gone. You're not even reading the papers about what's happening in the courts. And then you charge 12 people of that community for terrorism. In between that, Mon Repos happened. Mon Repos was caused to happen. You stage manage Mon Repos in your lack of respect for your own people because you feel that they can be used as collateral damage. You feel that a couple of Indian people's lives can be lost. You feel that their property can be lost. You'll just go in and by the afternoon pay them back. So you damage your own people property in order to prove that the other side is evil. And then you go in and pay them. You pay them for the play, the stage acting. How cynical you are. How cynical you are. And you believe that Indian people don't know what you're doing. You're so stupid that you don't realize that when you were rigging on election day with impersonating votes, that is your own Indian people talk on you. Better go around there, around there. Around there, me. I went to a polling station where they were doing impersonating. And a lady in the village tell me where. Look up a back there. Your own people are talking on you. But you're too stupid to understand that. You're too foolish to believe that because your own people are supporting you, that they don't know the lawlessness you're going on with in their name. The two young Indian women, I went to a place of their work And somebody said, 2 people want to talk to you. And I went to talk to the 2 people. They were 2 young Indian girls in their 20s. And they said, Dr. Hines, we follow you. We read what you write, we listen to what you say. But we want to make a plea to you. And I said, what is the plea? They said, talk to we sometimes. Talk to Indian people sometimes. How do we end up on the PPP thing? We vote for the PPP, but we end up on the thing. So must talk to we sometimes. They are too stupid to understand that dynamic. Those 2 sisters are telling me, don't come asking we for vote. I understand that. Don't come asking me for vote. But give us the truth. That's what we want from you. And that's okay. The vote is not the only necessary thing. Man shall not live by bread alone. And so this government is totally out of control, partly because of its own ignorance and partly because of the geopolitical situation. But geopolitics change. The Americans and the British and the Canadians don't have permanent friends. They have permanent interests. Not permanent friends. But you are too stupid to understand that. They throw them out of the international organization there the other day. What they're doing, they're blaming somebody else. They're blaming civil society. And look at the people they're blaming. They're blaming civil society. When they're not blaming civil society, they're blaming social media talk show hosts. I'm glad. Don't blame yourself. Because if you all blame yourself, people will say that you all have some virtue. Virtuous people admit the mistakes. So you all continue. In fact, I don't think you all have the capacity for self-criticism. Self-criticism is not a quality that comes easily. So IPADG, the umbrella organization for African Guyanese, cannot use a government building. Apartheid? Worse than that. You're denying apartheid, and every day. Apartheid means apart. Not just physically apart, but politically apart, socially apart. Economically apart, which means they are separate. Approaches to those communities. Remember the Supreme Court in 1896 came up with that clumsy, separate but equal, that you may be equal based on the 14th Amendment of the American Constitution that said all Americans have equal protection before the law. The same thing in Guyana. All we Black, Portuguese, Indian, Chinese, Amerindian, all we got equal protection before the law constitutionally. But as the Supreme Court of the United States said in 1896, you may be equal politically, but because you're socially unequal, you have to have separate amenities, separate reality. And that is what we have in Guyana. The Constitution says all kinds of flowery things, but we are separate. And if you're separate socially, then that opens the way for inequities. And so social inequities, in essence, means that you are unequal. Even if the Constitution says that you're equal. Because you're treated separately, it means that you are in essence unequal. So as far as the government is concerned, we are unequal in Guyana. Unequal. And the policies flow from that. If you're unequal, you can't come in with schoolroom and talk about land, go up on the road. You're unequal. We must never forget these things. I'm following in the footsteps of one of my mentors, Elder U.C. Guyana. In the 1960s, every incident that was carried out against African Guyanese, he documented it. And it's in a small book called Next Witness. And we have to document all these daily things that they're doing. We can't go in a schoolroom. You all just think about it. Black children are being chased out and beaten. They're being chased out of a school and they're being beaten. Ipadaji is being chased out of VITC school. Ethnic cleansing. You have no access to common resources. The school is a common resource. You can chase me out of your private place. But if you tell me a school, a commonly owned by the people of Guyana, then I can't. That's ethnic cleansing. There's a pattern. There's a pattern, sisters and brothers. There's a pattern. We have to document these things because not so far from now, not too long from now, the day of reckoning is coming. You can't continue doing like you're doing and expect that there will be no counter response. You're foolish if you believe that, and I think the PPP believes that. Since you believe it's David Hines and Aubrey Norton and Mark Benchop and Paul Slow and others who have the capacity to bring this day of reckoning, so you feel that if you silence them and you brutalize them, their names, that the day will not come. Our own Martin Carter said, that day will come, and when it comes, it will come and change this world. If I do not live to see that day, my son will see it. If my son doesn't see it, his son will see it. And it will come circling this world like fire. It will come to this land and to every land. And when it comes, I shall come alive again and laugh again and walk out of this prison. And that's what's going to happen. If you think you are imprisoning opposition supporters, you're imprisoning their minds, you're imprisoning their body, you're imprisoning them economically. If you think that that day will not come, you're stupid. And if you think when that day come, you're going to be able to get the police and the army to turn it back, you're stupid. Our own Bob Marley said, we jamming. No bullet can stop us now. There comes a time in every nation, no bullet can stop them now. Brother Bob said that. Native wisdom. We jamming. We hope this time is going to last. There's going to be a time when we're going to be jamming. And I predict that it will not be long from now. The way in which you all are going, putting black people out of schools, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, a day will come, it will soon come. And sisters and brothers, we've got to prepare for that day. We've got to prepare for that day. You see, we have to keep ourselves mobilized. We're human beings. We have to keep ourselves mobilized. This is the time for, first of all, self-preservation and self-defense. It's open war. Open war. See, one of the things that we learn in ethnic society, about ethnic societies, is their governments behave like the way the PPP government is behaving. When they feel that is an opportunity for revenge. In the PPP's leaders' minds, Dr. Jagan and the PPP were wronged. And they are going to correct that wrong now by seeking revenge on the supporters of the party they felt wronged them. That's what we're seeing. The subtext. The subtext is partly about this revenge that they seek. And they want us out of the way. They want us out of the way. They're going to say tomorrow David Hines was preaching violence. Because they're too stupid to recognize that the violence comes from them. And that when people respond to the violence of the state, you cannot equate the violence of the state with people's resistance. Resistance is a qualitatively different human act than dictatorship. You fight against dictatorship today, so tomorrow you don't have to do so. Are we doomed forever to be in this state where we have to constantly fight a government dictating to us, crushing our bodies, crushing our spirit? Are we doomed forever? My answer is no. We are not doomed forever. History teaches us that we're not doomed forever. We have to begin. We have to prepare ourselves for a new day. A day when we won't have to deal with a dictatorship anymore. When we get rid of this dictatorship, we must get rid of dictatorship forever in our Guyana. And we have to get rid of this dictatorship. Don't ask me to talk about a method. There are 1,000,001 methods to get rid of dictators. We have to prepare ourselves. You see, I always say that one of the functions of leaders is always to look for when opportunities present themselves. I thought an opportunity presented itself with the Mocha thing. They had gone too far in Mocha, too far. And it was there for all the citizens to see. It was there for the supporters to see. It was there for the international community to see. It was there for Exxon to see. But because we in the opposition and not work out a clear strategy about how we deal with this government, we couldn't take advantage of that opening. And we must not let that happen again. You see, it's okay to call for boots on the ground. We always need boots on the ground. You know, but boots on the ground marching aimlessly is not going to rid us of the stench of this dictatorship and the dictatorship itself. We have to have a leadership that spots opportunity, and we have to put our leaders in that frame of mind where they can anticipate the enemy. So that when the opening comes, you take it. And you may not win everything with that opening, but you push yourself closer to the door, the open door. So we've got to prepare ourselves, sisters and brothers. You take away the subvention from it, Padre G. Now you throw it, Padre G, out from a government building on the road. And I hear some black people saying, it Padre G and do nothing for them. Why do you always feel that something has to become and say, look, something. It Padre G doesn't have to do anything for you in that sense. What it Padre G is doing will benefit the community and by extension, you who make up the community. So it's not always stretch you on. Because the PPP is saying that that is part of our DNA. If a government come in the village and give you $30,000, you are so thankful. They actually believe that's all you think you're worth. If Padre G is laying the framework for a regeneration, for a resuscitation of African consciousness in Guyana. Without consciousness, we're not going anywhere. And so they've shown their hand again. They've shown their hand again. And we have to ask the question, how much longer? And we have to answer that question, how much longer? In a sense, the PPP government and party will implode. They must implode. All the studies of government doing what they're doing show that they will implode. But we've got to make it easier for them to implode. We've got to make them implode quicker. Their implosion opens the door for our liberation. We're not going to have no liberation without their implosion. And we have to quicken that implosion. We have to help them to implode. I said 3 years ago, I think, or 2 years ago, I called on our supporters, opposition supporters, to undermine the government. If a government undermines you, it's your moral right, your God-given right, and your constitutional right to undermine them. Challenge their legitimacy every time you have a chance to. Because if you undermine them and you keep challenging them, you weaken them. And the weaker they get, the easier it becomes for them to implode, and the quicker they implode. And so here we are tonight. Here we are tonight. We're not mourning. We are just recording in the tradition of Iusi Guyana. We are just recording the instances of brutality against us, so that the volume, when we put it in front of us, will drive us in the direction of liberating ourselves. So to Ipadaji, we stand with them, because in standing with Ipadaji, we standing with ourselves. And we continue to struggle. We've got to go into our communities. We do what we do here. We've got to go into our communities. And I think some of us are doing that. I can tell you, Mocha, I'll be there in a few weeks. Then Amstel, among other places. Because we've got to take this word, we've got to take this at every level. Mobilize, mobilize, organize, organize, mobilize, and ready ourselves to push down the door of this ungodly dictatorship. Ungodly. You don't have to be a Christian or a religious person to understand how ungodly and nasty these people are. You're putting out Ipadaji on the road from a school, a government school, in 2023. Oh, what ignorance could do. Ignorance mixed with power that was given to you, not earned. When you mix that with your undiluted ignorance, you put 750,000 people to the sword. But as our spiritual brothers and sisters say, we got our own sword. I've got a sword in my hand. Help me to use it well, God. Help me to use it well. Our spiritual brothers and sisters teach us that. They have their sword, the sword of government, the sword of power. We have the sword of resistance in our hands. And we beg Almighty God, we beg the ancestors, help us to use it well. If you are the big tree, we are the small axe waiting to cut you down. We are the small axe waiting to cut you down. Where shall Bombarding the whale as we go tonight? We are the small axe. If you are the big tree, we are the small axe. Sharpen to cut you down. Real sharp. Real sharp. Sharpen to cut you down. We go tonight on the small axe. Tomorrow night, we're back. I think I have Elder Hamilton Green tomorrow night. I think so. I think so. So I'll see you all tomorrow night. And tomorrow night I shall be having friends. As I say, we are good people. We are good human beings. We the supporters of the opposition. Whether we be Africans, Indians, Amerindian, Chinese, or Portuguese, or of European stock or of mixed stock. We are good people. We are good people because we are human beings. Let them know we are the small axe. Sharpen to cut you down. Real sharp. Real sharp. Big trees sometimes, oftentimes, fall under their own weight.